Hello, here we are. It's another Sunday, and on Sundays, I try to review a book. I try to review a book each week, and it's been so fun having the discipline to have to read or listen to a book each week. And this week is a really interesting week because most of the books I read come highly recommended from people that I really respect. And they tell me the books, like their number one book, or the thing that changed their life their most, or whatever it may be. And so I take recommendations, and those are the books that I read from people that I really respect, right? And occasionally I'll read a book off of some, best of list, like, 10 best business books to read, or 10 best sales books to read, or 10 best books of 2024. So I occasionally pick a book off that list. Recently, or this week, I picked a book because it just has so much attention, and it's so popular, and it's on the socials everywhere, and it's in my feed somehow. And so I go, I've never heard of this book. I've never heard of the author. I'm like, people love it. People love this lady. I go, I'm going to give it a try. And so this week's book, the book that I read, is The Let Them Theory from Mel Robbins. And I'm chuckling because I'm having a hard time reviewing this book. First, as you can see from my Audible, it was 10 hours and 38 minutes. And it only seemed like 10 weeks and 12 days to get through this book. I mean, it was a chore listening to this 10 hours and 38 minutes, which is not to say the book wasn't good, by the way, because I don't want to leave that impression. But the very first, in the introduction, I was listening for the first 5 minutes, and I almost turned it off. I almost said, God, this isn't a book for me. Like, what in the world do people see? And then I got past the introduction, or the introduction, and I got to the first chapter, and I'm like, oh, you know what? This is actually pretty good. I guess there's some wisdom in here. I want to listen to it. And the second chapter kind of reiterated the first chapter, which is great. But then as the chapters unfolded, there were definitely nuggets of wisdom, really good ideas, really good tools and techniques for your self-development. But it also started to sound like, one, and this isn't a bad thing when I say it, we're essentially, we're getting advice from most likely, this is my impression, from a woman who's had extensive personal therapy for the last 30 years, and she's sharing her best practices from that therapy, which doesn't invalidate it, by the way, but it's like a shortcut of getting 30 years of therapy. We could just listen to this book for 20 years and get the same kind of feedback. So that was the first thing. And like I said, that's not a bad thing. And certainly the author, Mel Robbins, she cites a whole bunch of really highly acclaimed folks from academia, a lot of folks from Harvard and MIT. She weaves out in those people's theories into the book to support her own Let Them theory really, really well. But nevertheless, you do feel like, it's like your best friend sharing what they learned about, from therapy for the last 30 years. And then the second thing is, and I don't want this to be sexist, because I'm trying not to be sexist, but it sounded like a lot of the book would resonate more with women. Because there's quite a few chapters in this book, and what happens is she explains her Let Them theory, which I'm explaining in a second, and then she applies it to all sorts of stuff that you face throughout life, right? And then she tries to teach you how to use this theory to cope with those things, and then to succeed and thrive. But like the last three chapters are about a whole bunch of chapters about how to love people, how to love difficult people. How do you know when the love isn't good enough? How do you make love better? And it really felt like she was talking to her 3 daughters, which there's nothing wrong with that, or 3 kids, there's nothing wrong with that. But I'm guessing those chapters probably really resonated with women, because it really would sound like how a mom would talk to their kids, which would be different than how a dad might talk to their kids. But that was my impression. And then there was also a interesting, and not off-putting, but there are a handful of times when she gets emotional in the book, especially towards the end, and it's authentic. There's nothing wrong with it, but just not something that I normally come across when I'm listening to an audiobook. But I can tell that Mel is an accomplished speaker. She's super popular on the socials. She's written a couple books. She also wrote the 5-Second Rule: Take Control of Your Life. And so she has a huge following. Huge. She's now an international world-class speaker, and she has this massive podcast. It might be the most listened to podcast in its category. She has this giant best-selling book. And then she has some of the most social media views. Like she was number 6, I think, in 2023 or 2024 of all YouTube videos watched. I mean, like crazy numbers. So I'm not at all discounting her. It just didn't quite resonate with me as much. So I'm now giving you my impression of the book. I am not going to go through all. I'm going to try to avoid going through all 20 chapters and explaining how to apply the let them theory to every single thing. Instead, I'll just really explain the let them theory, which is really simple. It comes down to let them. It really means let adults be adults. Let adults be responsible for their own actions. That's really all it is. And so if an adult does something you don't like, so what? Let them. If an adult does something that offends you, so what? Let them. If an adult lets you down, so what? Let them. Let adults be adults. Let adults be responsible for themselves. Don't take responsibility for an adult. Now, she says it's very, very different for kids and really even young adults who haven't quite matured completely. For adults that are under 25, there you need to be responsible for their emotions and their psyche and their support and all that kind of stuff. But for adults, don't even try. Let them. So that's the let them theory. Just let people be people. Let them. And then the second part of the theory, which isn't in the title, but it's probably even a bigger part of the theory, is let me. So let them, let other people be whoever they are. Let adults be their own adult. Let them make their own choices. But then I have the freedom and power to make my own choices. And so while I should never try to change an adult, I always have the power to make a decision how to react or interact with that adult. Like it's my choice. So I'll give you an example. If you're dating someone and they're not respecting you, they're not as into you as you are into them, they're not making a commitment, whatever it may be, right? She would argue, let them be that way. They don't like you. It's perfectly okay if they don't like you. Let them. Or they don't want to be committed, or they don't want to be in a relationship. Let them. But you have the power and freedom to then make your choice. Let me decide whether I want to, settle for this. Let me decide whether this is the right person to be in a relationship. Let me decide if I want to go look for a better partner. Let me. And she probably goes, and I really like this, the let me take personal responsibility for you, but do not take responsibility for another adult. And so that's the essence. You just got the whole deal right there. I just whittled down, boom, 10 and a half hours to like 2 minutes of overview. But I will just quickly, I'm not going to break down these chapters too much. You can kind of get it, from the title of the chapter. Chapter 1, stop wasting your life on things you can't control. That's the let them, right? Stop trying to control other people. You need to focus on yourself, not other people. Freedom, by the way, comes from letting other people be themselves. And she talks a lot about, a lot of the stress, all the conflict we have is trying to change other adults or taking responsibilities for other adult behaviors, which in some ways is just like, that's just a failure to take responsibility for ourselves, right? Chapter 2 she starts to explain the let them, let me, which is interesting. Life, see, now you start to get the flavor. I'm just going to read some of these chapters to get it. Chapter 3, shocker, life is stressful. And so she talks about how to manage stress. Chapter 4, let them stress you out, right? And so here's what she says, by the way. Don't take on other people's stress. If somebody's in a bad mood, if somebody is whatever they're doing, let them They're an adult. They can be in a cruddy mood. They can be a sourpuss. They can be whatever. Let them. And then you can decide whether you want to be around them or not. And you can decide what your attitude is. But don't take on their stress. Don't take on their moods. Don't take on their emotions. Just worry about yourself, right? And then on chapter 5, she's like, yeah, let them think bad thoughts about you. If somebody thinks bad thoughts about you, let them. What do you care? Let them. All you care about is what you think about yourself. So don't start wearing what people think about you. Don't adopt it. Don't validate it. Don't even worry about it. Let them. People, it's all right. People can dislike you. And she used an example. Here's things I don't like about my husband. And she lists a few. She goes, but I love him. I love him. And it's my right to not like some things, right? And it's his right not to like things about me. So, kind of give you an example. Chapter 6 is how to love difficult people. It's, I'm not going to go into it. You can check it out. Right related to that chapter 7 is when grown-ups throw tantrums, and once again, she goes, let them, let them, right? Let them. You can't take responsibility for another adult. All you can do is make your own choices. And by the way, in this chapter, she gets into, she goes, look, my therapist told me that, Mel, you have to remember, most adults have, an emotional maturity of age 8. And why they may not just kick and scream like an 8-year-old, they still do all the same mannerisms. They still pout and they give you the silent treatment and all this stuff. So, each one of these chapters is super interesting, and it is interesting how she applies her theory to these chapters. It's just a lot. It's a lot, trust me. Chapter 8 is the right decision often feels wrong. She goes, a lot of times, making the right decision, what to do is right, feels wrong, but that doesn't keep you from making the right decision. Like staying in a bad relationship. You know that you should leave, or staying in a relationship that has no future. Like let's say that your partner really loves you, but you're not that into them. You know it doesn't have a future. The right thing is to break up, even though it feels wrong to do to that person that you care about, right? And then chapter 9 is, yes, life isn't fair, and so she's like, stop expecting fairness, instead make the best out of every situation. She goes on in that chapter. 10, how to make comparison your teacher. This was pretty interesting. She goes, there's 2 types of comparison. One is good and one is bad. The bad comparison is like envy. The good comparison is, hey, what can I learn from that person? What can I adopt to make myself a better person? Those are the 2 types of comparison. 11, the truth no one told you about adult friendship. See, this is where I think this is going to appeal more to women, because this is a very long chapter, and 11 and 12 are kind of the same. It's like how to make friends when you're adult. And why it's interesting, like, look, friendship in adulthood is totally different, and she goes deep into this, and she goes, so you got to understand it's just different, and then how to create friends is totally different, and then how to keep friends. And so she gives you a ton of techniques. But it just came across to me. It just seems like it would resonate with a whole bunch of females. I don't have a whole bunch of male friends I know that are going bummed out that they don't have enough friends. But that, I don't know. Maybe it's who I'm hanging out with, right? And so there's 3 chapters on how to make friends and keep friends as adults. You kind of get in the gist there. Chapter 14. People only change when they really feel like it. She's like, don't waste energy trying to change people. They're not going to change. Change comes within, and change comes when people want to change. And oftentimes, change is harder than staying the course. And so she goes, stop it. Either accept people out as they are, or get them out of your life. It's the problem is you, not them, right? And she has really good examples in here, especially like in a marriage. Let's say your husband gets, fat or whatever happens to be. He doesn't help with chores or help at home, or he's inattentive or unloving. It's like, that's who he wants to be. You can't change him. Don't try. You either accept it or you don't, right? But then she does, it's not hopeless, because she goes, however, you can have influence. You can't make them change, but you can role model the appropriate behavior that will have influence over time to get them to change. And if it doesn't, then you have to decide whether it's a deal breaker, kind of thing. And then in 16, the more you rescue somebody, the more they sink. Pretty useful. That was very, psychologist-like. It was pretty useful. How to provide support the right way, because you have to let people have their own, adults be adults, but how do you support people? kind of interesting. Then she goes, there's a chapter, let them show you who they are. And that just simply means, hey, look, people reveal their true selves on what they do, not what they say. So pay attention to what they do and take that as the truth, right? And now we get the last 3 chapters of how you take your relationship to the next level, how every ending is a beautiful beginning. And then she finishes in the conclusion, your let me era is here. So there you go. That's the let them theory. I waited through this book 10 hours and 38 minutes for you, so I've saved you. There are quite a few people that will listen to this book review, and this is a great book for them. As a matter of fact, this is a good book for anyone. It's just that it's going to have, the flavor is probably going to be more attractive to some people other than others. But it's a good book. I'm glad I was exposed to Mel Robbins. I'd probably listen to some of her stuff again. Probably wouldn't go through a 10-hour book, but I'm glad I did it. I hope you got something out of it. I hope you appreciate this book review. When I'm not here doing these videos, I'm on LinkedIn. I try to post every day, industry stuff, real estate, mortgage, sales, economy. Hopefully people get value out of that. With that, hope you're having a great weekend. Hope you had a good end of your week. And if you're watching this at the beginning of the week, I hope you're having a great start to your week. Thanks so much. I look forward to talking to you again soon.